Okay, so we're gonna start as a really like random decision. We base that on a graduation date, and so the first speaker today is Maddie. Maddie graduated in 2020, which was a great year to do university studies. But she's currently working with the British Red Cross. Very recently came back from Damascus, and yeah, kindly joining us from London. Maddie, thanks a lot. Good to see you again, and yeah, the floor is yours for the next like 5-6 minutes.
Lovely. Thank you so much. I'm just going to quickly share my screen, just because I thought it was just helpful to have some visuals. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly do a quick intro. Yeah, my name is Maddie. I did the master's course in HCRI in 2019 to 2020, which was kind of prematurely cut a little bit short due to yeah, the pandemic. But yeah, just to kind of go into why I picked the course first, I think kind of helps in terms of my career afterwards. So could you just let me know if you can see the PowerPoint quickly? Brilliant. So in 2018 to 2019, I had got kind of involved in volunteering and kind of interested in the situation going on at the Calais border. So I volunteered with an organisation called Refugee Community Kitchen for around 18 months, and there we were coordinating the kitchen, running hot meals for the displaced communities there in Calais, Dunkirk, and a bit of Brussels. And I'd kind of seen a lot of things there. It was all a bit ad hoc. It was all a bit grassrootsy. And there were some things that were super effective, but also some things that were kind of irresponsible. And there wasn't really like, you know, the red tape around professional, responsible assistance. So I did the master's to kind of gain those responsible skills. So yeah, I did the master's and it was, yeah, super great. It was really nice to kind of go in a little bit older, in doing something that I was super interested in. During my time in Calais, I also volunteered for a French organisation called Utopia 56 and Human Rights Observers, which, if any of you are familiar, do lots of reporting on the situation, mainly in Europe, across kind of the border and border violence and securitization. After I graduated, it was COVID, so it was a little bit difficult, and I was in Manchester, and I was kind of hell-bent that I'll stay in Manchester and I'll work for a British organisation. I was kind of conflicted with the idea of jumping abroad. I didn't speak a second language. I was fresh out of doing my master's, and it isn't responsible, in my opinion, to go and leave and work in another country when there's those issues in the UK as well. It was difficult. It was difficult to get into a role that I felt aligned with my background. So as a tip, I kind of searched for words that I was interested in. So I got a job with Shelter in Manchester for resettlement services within prison custody. So Shelter had an office based in a prison in Salford, and we were there as the kind of triage and resettlement services to prevent homelessness and provide holistic support while arriving and when leaving custody, and any other kind of essential crisis needs that were necessary. And that kind of provided me the skills in terms of people, communication, the real kind of issues that are at bay at crisis. And there's kind of very few crises worse than being in custody. So I was there for 18 months. And in that time, I was trying to get into the British Red Cross or any kind of disaster, humanitarian, resettlement, migration role. But as you know, and you probably have seen, it is difficult and it's super competitive. So through lots of trials and tribulations and lots of failed job applications, I finally got a job with the British Red Cross, with the UK operations, specifically for their Ukraine family visa scheme. So this was a casework for families that had arrived into the UK, providing them with benefits, any kind of ad hoc psychosocial support, community support, and linking up. And it kind of tied into the work I was doing in Calais in terms of migration support, and the things that I saw were these big gaps in the needs that people need when they come to a new country that often has huge gaps in services, and there's always someone that you're passed on to. So I was there for 7 months, and that was really my foot in the door to get into the British Red Cross International Directorate, which I had been trying to get into. This is more aligned to kind of the work that we're doing in what we were doing in the HCRI or IDM, and that is your international facing programs and projects. For me, it was important it was UK based still. So I got a role, thankfully, as a response officer for the earthquake response, the 2023 Turkey-Syria earthquake. Based on the kind of work and roles and communication skills and interfacing skills I'd had from my previous roles, I managed to get this job. And this job involved lots of focal point visits as the British Red Cross focal point for our grants to the Turkish Red Crescent, and lots of grant management, donor management, relationship building. And if anyone's familiar, within the Red Cross, we have Red Crescents, and we also have the Secretariat, which is the International Federation of the Red Cross. So that's your kind of umbrella secretariat that we often work multilaterally through in crises. And they help kind of funnel support funding in a more streamlined way. So specifically with the Turkey earthquake, Turkish Red Crescent, I don't know if anyone's familiar with them. They are very, very efficient and a really, really professional and high capacity organization. So they didn't need our direct support. They went through the IFRC, which my role was working and brokering that relationship. In that role, I also had a nice few visits to Turkey, got to go to the embassy, and that was, a great personal experience, and that kind of built my confidence to apply for my current role, which I am the Syria Programme Officer. So not just one specific response, but multiple projects within our Syria portfolio at the British Red Cross. I've currently been in this role for 8 months, and that's really building on our bilateral support to the Syrian Arab Red Crescent, who are a phenomenal Red Crescent. Grant management, so making sure our payments our contracts are right, donor management, and the same relationship building and partner national society relationship building as well. The job is great. It's challenging. There's always blocks. I learn lots. I just went to Damascus last week to visit the Syrian Arab Red Crescent and our partner national societies. And it was really brilliant to see what they were doing kind of on the granular community level as well, in terms of livelihood support to kind of small businesses or people that want to begin a new business, small business. And that's where our kind of money is going. Our direct cash is going to people's pockets within our Syria portfolio. So for me, it's really effective use of funds. And I really enjoy it. I'm trying to be as quick as possible. But I did just want to add a little slide at the end here on my journey of kind of how I've got to where I am and what I would do differently, and kind of any encouragement for you guys as well. So for me, I've been in Calais, and since coming out, I would say join like-minded groups and keep your brain stimulated, especially when you graduate, because there is a big gap between graduating and a job. Networking in those kind of like-minded groups, if it's activism or it's writing or it's a think tank, that network really helps you. Take the free trainings on the platforms. So Kaya Connect. I know you guys have that at HCRI, and I definitely really benefited from that. IFRC do lots of trainings, the Humanitarian Leadership Academy, and Disaster Ready as well. They provide great free trainings that you can apply, and when you're doing your CV, you can add it on as a training. I know I had a big lull for a year when I was trying to get in, and this really helped. You might start very low down, and you might find it hard to get into an entry-level job, especially now after USAID funding. Keep doing those trainings and keep doing volunteer roles that will keep adding to your CV while you're waiting. What I wish I'd done differently is take some time out and learn a language, a second language, so French, Spanish, Arabic at a language school. So if you have 3 months over summer, go to a French school. I really wish I'd done that. So yeah, and you use LinkedIn. I know it feels a bit against what you want to do, but it's really helpful, specifically for me. I contacted people within the British Red Cross in roles I wanted to do, ask them how they got that job, how they got into that kind of sector, and take those things on board. And interview and apply anyway. It's good just to get your name out there. And people want to help people. They know how hard it is. They will pass on your name if they can. So that's a few of my sage bullet points. Any questions? I'm really happy to answer them at the end. But yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie. That's super interesting and also very useful tips. I will just say it's not too late for you to learn a new language, especially French. I'm sure you can do it. Next, I know that Jack was having. Oh no, I can see you, Jack. So you can go next, Jack. The floor is yours.
Sure thing.
For the
Thank you.
next year.
Can everyone hear me okay as well? Yeah, perfect. So I graduated in 2022. So I did the master's, did the MA during 2021, 2022, which is a really, really interesting time to do it, actually, kind of given the world events that unfolded then, and particularly thinking about the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which quite what defined our, particularly the second half of our year. But before my master's, and the reason I went into it is because I did a languages undergrad, which definitely kind of guided the understanding of the world and kind of wanting to do something about the injustices that we see all around us. And had lived abroad in a couple of North African countries, but in a more of a language learning capacity. So the master's was like a nice little segue beyond that. And whilst I was doing the masters, I volunteered every week for Refugee Action, and was also lucky enough to be on the Halo Trust bursary, which helped kind of guide my dissertation, which was on the climate, the intersection of climate and conflict in the Horn of Africa, which played quite nicely into then what I ended up doing next. So graduated, we finished academic studies in the May-June time, and that summer that I worked on the dissertation, I was a little bit naughty and went to Egypt for 3 months, which was actually really, really good because it was a good break from the pressure of the masters, but also quite a nice way to get exposure to another culture, where accommodation was a lot cheaper than it was back in Manchester. So there's that. Thereafter, I interned with the Halo Trust for 3 months, working on policy for their Horn of Africa post-landmine humanitarian initiatives. Then joined the Royal United Services Institute think tank back in February 2023, I think that was now, which was a big move down to London, working on more project management responsibilities. So I was a project officer at the lowest rung, but that was really, really good in terms of, as Maddie was saying before, exposure to different events and to different things that are interlinked to kind of what I'd studied, and also things that I hadn't necessarily been exposed to in the past as well. So, for example, we did a lot of work on preventing and countering violent extremist narratives. So stuff that I wasn't working on necessarily in terms of project write-ups and research, but in terms of supporting projects that colleagues were doing, attending all of these fantastic events. Then about a year after that, I switched slightly. So the sector is notoriously tough in terms of fundraising, and kind of keeping the continuity of work, and got made redundant. But that was, looking back on it, probably not a bad thing, because it forced me to kind of reevaluate what was important to me, and to do something that kind of was a bit more applied. So my current role, I'm working for a private intelligence geopolitical risk type firm based in London, which looks at, so my team focuses on Mali and the Sahel in general. So I'm looking at using open source methods. So that's things like social media, Telegram, geospatial, things, that kind of stuff, to produce weekly reports on the landscape, the threat landscape, for various different clients. So that should be really, really interesting. But without all of these different kind of previous experiences, I definitely wouldn't have ended up there right now. And the work's super interesting. It's quite stimulating. Isn't much of any travel at the minute, so I think that's probably kind of, those opportunities are a little bit harder to get. But it's not a linear path. And I think, to echo Maddie as well, it's about the conversations that you can have, and the other little things you can add to your CV, which you don't necessarily think are valuable at the time. It's maybe like an hour a week commitment, that then do add up, because they produce, new areas of interest. It's the questions that you ask, it's the routes that you go down that you don't necessarily expect. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing. Later down the line, who knows where this will take me, but yeah, didn't expect to end up here 2 or 3, well, yeah, 4 years afterwards. So yeah, thank you, everyone. And if anyone's got any questions, yeah, feel free to ask.
Thanks a lot, Jack. That's great. And indeed, maybe not where I imagined you being, but it's super interesting job. And yeah, looking forward to hear more, but I'm sure people will have questions, and yeah, super interesting. Then we have Ellie that I cannot see. Oh yeah, you're here.
Yeah.
So graduated in 23 from the proud representative of the MSc IDM. The floor is yours for the next 5 minutes.
Hi everyone, I'm Ellie. I am currently working as an emergency planning officer at Somerset Council. And how that kind of happened is I spent the summer writing my dissertation, kind of was thinking ag, the world outside university awaits. And so I was looking through a couple of various different opportunities, and at one point I got shared something that was offering an application for a civil contingencies officer with Somerset Council. So went to there and applied for the job. I finished writing my dissertation on the Friday, and something I'd recommend doing, but it worked out because I got the job. Moved down to Somerset about a month later. Didn't really know anything about the county at that point. And on my second day, we had a massive storm hit, and we went into major incident territory because of flooding. So it was quite the it was quite the induction. So over the last sort of 18 months, I've been involved in all of our multi-agency working. We've done two big exercises. We've worked through very major incidents, and I've started to go through training, that kind of thing, get more involved in different areas. I've started training on a piece of legislation that's called Control of Major Accident Hazards, or COMA for short, which is about hazardous materials, chemicals, for instance, and chemical working plants. But one of the things to be aware of with things like emergency planning roles in the UK is that there are loads of them out there in different in different guises. There's ones in local authority like I do, there's ones with the blue lights, there's ones with the Met Office, there's ones with the Environment Agency, and all of those form something that's called a Category 1 responder under the Civil Contingencies Act, which if you're interested in emergency planning in the UK is something I'd have a look at. It's a big document, but there are pages linked to it, so don't feel the need to go through and memorize legislation, but kind of look at what the emergency planning strategy is in the UK. And there's loads of supplemental material on that, so things like community risk register. Type in Greater Manchester Community Risk Register, you can see what the risks that affect Manchester are. Various locations in the UK will have different ones. There's also a National Risk Register that looks at like the UK hazards. And so just kind of like familiarizing yourself with them, looking into them is something you could do. Beyond that as well, there's things like if you are interested in organizations like the Red Cross and other voluntary organizations, they often work in tandem with these other with other responders in the UK. So we work a lot with the Red Cross. So look at voluntary agencies groups, and also quite frequently they end in prepared. So there'll be sort of websites like ours is Somerset Prepared, there's Greater Manchester Prepared, I think there's Wiltshire and Swindon Prepared, and they kind of outline what the emergency planning and community role is within different areas. So that's something to look at. From the academic side as well, don't be afraid to, like, when you're going and talking to different people, don't be afraid to use things like what your academic experience is. So for instance, my dissertation was on death management in disasters, and I spoke about that at my interview. And one of the things I also do now is work with the death management working groups to discuss things like mortuary capacity. So that's directly from there. And kind of last thing, I know I've got notes, but I know I've been a bit all over the place. But I've been asked about this specifically by my boss. We do actually have jobs available at Somerset Council for emergency planning roles. So we've got one permanent and one interim role. They will be advertised probably in the first week of June, and I'm happy to send Anton and Martin links to those so that they can be distributed. But yeah, any questions about emergency planning in the UK or IDM, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks, Ellie. That's great. And on the job offer, also don't hesitate. I can't remember if you're in the LinkedIn alumni group, but that's also the perfect space. Like if you want to post that kind of job offers, it's always super useful. But yeah, thanks a lot for what you just said. In particular, I think insisting on the usefulness of the dissertation, because I remember a few months ago when I had to convene the main kind of introduction session on the dissertation. I was really trying to convince our current students that being a bit strategic in the way you design your dissertation can be a very useful way for your career development, especially in that getting that first role. And I think you're the perfect example. The fact that indeed your dissertation on a specific topic can be an excellent business card or like concrete evidence that you have a sustained interest in a certain area for a certain organization and so on. Martin, did you want to add anything? I could see your eyes lighting up with all the legislation and framework that Ellie was mentioning.
I was just really pleased that Ellie was talking about things that... Ellie, you didn't do my course in hazards, did you?
No, I don't think so, no.
It happened the year after. Okay, we teach all of that now, so I was really pleased to hear that that's important. So
I can send you something about Jessup that's quite funny.
And I think I might tap you up next year as well, if I can.
Okay.
I mean, I'll just reiterate what Ellie says about the kind of avenue for hazard management, particularly because obviously that's something I'm interested in. And you talked about the different organisations And you've got the council, you've got the blue lights, and you've got the agencies. You've got obviously the Environment Agency, Natural England or English Nature. I never know which way around that is. It's one of those. But looking at those, the application of what we cover, certainly in IDM, is particularly useful for those types of roles. So that was really useful to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. And next, so we have Kendall, who's a 2024 graduate, so much more recent. Also did a undergrad with us in HCRI. Kendall currently at the Chatham House, so talking to us from London. Yeah, thanks a lot, Kendall, for joining us, and great to see you again. And the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. So yeah, quickly, I actually didn't do my undergrad at HCRI, but I was here for a while. I did a part-time master's, so I was here for 2 years. So I've been around, yeah. So that'll be why.
You should have corrected me the first time. That was very polite of you.
Yeah, I missed that. Sorry. Yeah.
You were a part-time student. That's why I knew I saw you more than a year, but that wasn't not that long. Okay. Thanks for correcting me.
Yeah, no problem. So so graduated in 2024, did a part-time master's. And I think that my job sort of career experience so far has sort of been very defined by a little bit of job insecurity, just like real desperation for a job, which I think a lot of people have, and probably a little bit of luck along the way too, which is always helpful. So going back to, so I started my master's in 2022, and I came into my master's with sort of this big pursuit of CV building. So that just looks like in the master's, just taking every opportunity that I could, saying yes to everything extracurricular, just getting it down and doing all those things. I also did in the summer of 2023, I did a internship. I really wanted to get some sort of concrete experience and some communications and social media experience in particular. I thought that was something that could be transferable to a lot of careers. So I actually went a bit left field and worked for 2 months for a company called Pulse Brands. And they mainly worked in the oil and gas sector, doing their internal communications for a major oil field in Iraq. And that was something that was really, it was interesting. It didn't exactly align with where I saw myself. But again, in my sort of pursuit of saying yes to everything, it was something that ended up being really valuable. Hearing those other perspectives is something that I actually found really interesting. And while it wasn't something I wanted long-term for myself, it was really useful, and I gained a lot of experiences, skills, and perspectives from that. Alongside my master's, I also spent most of my time doing my part-time job at a restaurant called Rudy's. And there, again, that was another thing, try to get that experience. I became their sustainability champion, which in practice didn't look like a lot, but, was something to talk about in interviews and stuff. And yeah, in between, I'd say in the last year of my master's, I did look back at my little spreadsheet. I did 45 applications for jobs. I managed to get 3 interviews, and very luckily, the only interview that I was successful in was the Chatham House internship interview. So I started that in September. I started in the Africa programme. And for anyone that doesn't know, Chatham House is a London-based foreign policy institute think tank who tries to sort of help governments and societies build a more sustainable, prosperous world through a lot of dialogue, research, and leadership. In practice, that sort of means talking to everyone. That means research, and that's that convening. So, for example, in the Africa programme, the way that would look is, very recently, it's 2 years of war in Sudan was marked. So we would do a small round table on that. On the sort of the research side, anything that comes up in the, often things that come up in the news, for example, recent DRC-US trade deal, an expert comment will be done on that. So a large part of my role is doing those events. So in my time, I've arranged events for the foreign ministers of Rwanda, the DRC, Nigeria. I've arranged events for the ex-Prime Minister of Sudan, Abdel Hamdok, and quite random people like Nancy Pelosi and Antony Blinken, and some crazy people that just seem to be about all the time. And a lot of it as well is just doing those smaller private roundtables with sort of civil society, with NGOs, and again, with government representatives. It's also doing research and briefings for funders, so working with funders and doing briefings for them. And I also work on the podcast, the Africa Aware podcast. I would highlight that my role very much is not necessarily research. And that is a lot of roles in this sector aren't necessarily those sort of straightforward research roles that you might expect, but you do have to be really on it and you have to sort of know what's going on. You know, for example, it could be one day you have to sort of arrange an event on blockchain and crypto, and the next day it's sort of on Gabon's election, and then you have to do a briefing on Liberia. It's really, really varied, and those, I think that, yeah, I came into this thinking I do a lot more research than I actually do, but I think it's often beneficial to sort of expand your idea of what does research actually look like. And yeah, so where I am now is I spent the last sort of 3 months, again, I think I applied to about 25 jobs, got 3 interviews, and yeah, luckily, very recently found out that I will be staying on at Chatham House as a program coordinator for the Global Economics and Finance team. So yeah, big relief. But I think that, yeah, words of advice that I've, you know, sort of learned along the way, I would sort of echo the language thing. I don't speak a language. It's really handy in applications. Just get some level of language if you can, if you have the time. I would say yes to as much as possible and don't be afraid to move sideways. It's a really, really competitive sector. And sort of it's really important to get that practical experience that, you know, some things might seem quite unrelated, like that internship I did for that smaller company, Pulse, but I learned a lot, and those sort of practical skills that you learn, that sort of project management, that finance, that communications, is going to be really important alongside all the research and academia that you do. And I would also say, like, it's okay if it takes a long time. There isn't any rush. It might take a while. It might take, you know, 50 to 100 applications. It is a numbers game, and there is a degree of luck involved. But I would say just keep going, keep saying yes to things. And yeah, I'm always happy to talk to anyone and happy to answer any questions. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks a lot, Kendall. When you mention extracurriculum activities, especially when, yeah, at the university, for instance, were you one of student ambassadors, or were you involved in the HCRI society?
Yeah, so I was a student ambassador for a little bit.
Yeah,
I think I was the comms person for the HCRI society.
Yeah,
I did a lot of career stuff as well, so I made the alumni network. So yeah, sort of had my fingers in many pies, so to speak, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think also the point you mentioned about, you know, your position at Rudy's, even though indeed, you know, that was probably not a super formative experience for you, but that's still something that you can kind of highlight in an interview. So indeed, very, very important. But yeah, thanks a lot, and congrats on the new job. That's very good news.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Jazz, with the same cohort as Kendall, but full-time. By the way, Kendall, maybe later we can come back on also your experience as a part-time student, because that might be interesting. But Jazz, oh yeah, I can see you now. Who is actually in Manchester. We're the only 2 people in Manchester on that panel, and currently working for VoiceAbility for the last few months. Is that correct?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Jazz. I graduated in last year, and maybe I just give like a bit of backstory at what I've done so far. Like, so I completed my bachelor's degree in 2022. I had a year out, and in that year, I was sort of like figuring out what I wanted to do. I did history bachelor's, and I didn't want to be a historian, so I looked at what I did want to do, and I knew it was something to do with like human rights. And I looked at jobs and like people, like on LinkedIn, I was just like stalking people and like seeing their career trajectories and what they were doing to get in. And I found out as like many of the panel have said, like you need a language, and most of the applications I thought you also needed a master's, so that's why I applied to the HCRI. I did take 6 months in Paris, but my French isn't that good anymore, unfortunately, because I don't use it anymore. But yeah, and then I started the master's in 2023. And it was quite intense. I was similar to Kendall, like going in with like pure, I want a career in this, saying yes to everything sort of stuff. So I was student rep. I was also on the alumni committee, stuff like that, which is really, honestly, like super helpful on the CV. Like they weren't much in practice. Like me and Kendall, like we met maybe like once a month for the alumni thing, but still it's like showing your interest, showing your like commitment / engagement, and specifically the student rep thing is super helpful for the job I do right now. So yeah, when I finished my thesis in September and that was all done, I sort of had like a month mental break because it was so stressful and like so hectic, and then I was sort of like applying for so many jobs. As Kendall said, it is a numbers game, unfortunately. I knew I wanted to stay in Manchester because I had this like realization similar to what Maddie said, I think at the beginning, about like not wanting to move abroad straight away, like wanting to sort of help within the UK itself. So yeah, I wanted to stay in Manchester. Also, it worked out for like personal reasons, like wanting to be with friends and stuff like that, and it's a fun city. So yeah, I was just bulk applying. I think I do have a spreadsheet, but I haven't looked at it. So I think I was probably around like 50 applications or so. I secured 2 interviews, both for very similar roles actually. And I got this job as an advocate at VoiceAbility. I've never when I was applying for jobs, I knew I wanted to do something along like the campaigning, advocating, that sort of stuff. So those were like the keywords I was using in my searches. And this is when the advocate role popped up because it's advocacy and advocate are the same word. But going into it, like I didn't actually know what advocacy was in the UK. Like there's a specific job, which I now am aware of as I'm working as one. But yeah, it was quite a learning curve. Like for that application, it was pretty intense. Like it was quite a long application, and then we had to do like a scenario-based situation for the actual interview. And then I found out that I got it, and that was amazing. So I was like, yes, it was just so much relief. And yeah, I started there in December. And essentially, what it is there's a few different types of advocacy. VoiceAbility work with statutory advocacy, so like legal side of advocacy. There's also general side, which is less legal. And my job is a mental health advocate. So I go to hospitals. I work in Wythenshawe Hospital and North Manchester General Hospital, and I go to the mental health wards there, and I see my clients there who get referrals from the nurses, and I basically help them to communicate with the staff, make sure that their voices are being heard in their care, explain their rights to them, because they have specific rights for like appealing their section, because they're detained there, which some people is obviously against their liberty. So there's a whole like legal framework that I work within. There's other types of advocacy too, like mental capacity. So perhaps like someone with dementia, or maybe like a learning disability of sorts, like, or even like a brain injury, which they are deemed to lack capacity over decision making, which like affects decisions affecting like the finances or long-term accommodation sort of stuff. Basically helping people to make sure that their voice is brought to the table within the room of professionals, because it's usually like doctors or social workers, people like that are making those decisions. So my role is to make sure that they're heard in that. I've only been doing it since December, so I'm still really new to it. I'm learning a lot. Every day is very different. It's client facing, so it's quite like impactful. Like I get to see the impact I have on different people, which is very different to like working in like an office or like sort of removed from a situation that you're talking about, or like researching, for example. So yeah, that's my role. If you have any questions, let me know. I might just preface actually, before going into this, I didn't have any like mental health experience. I did write a few assignments and stuff about like belonging, and that sort of fed into mental health and like, oh no, sorry, I literally forgot what my thesis was about. My thesis was about personal security. So that's like a sense of like self and having things that can allow you to like live, and that really fed into my interview. The student rep thing also fed into my interview because I was like asking people what they wanted from the course / staff / careers and stuff, and that got fed back directly to the staff. So yeah, that's me. I think I've been waffling for a bit too long, but you're welcome.
No, thanks a lot, Jazz. That's great. And yeah, the role seems very interesting. And indeed, I think it's important to unpack a little bit what it means, like advocacy or to work as an advocate, because it can be a bit vague in the UK sector, but also beyond. Good point on insisting on the importance of being a student rep, and that's a shout also for like future students. Do volunteer for the role, because I think it's as you say, not that time consuming, and it's very interesting for the student reps themselves. It's super useful for us when we have student reps who are dedicated to the role. I have to say we're very lucky most of the time. That's, by the way, me thanking our current student reps for the help with designing the session. And indeed, like Jazz and Brighty, I remember last year, like you did a very good job at kind of linking the whole cohort with everyone teaching at HCRI, and that was super useful. Martin, what should we do? We don't have that much time left. I guess we could go, because I've made us start a bit late. We can go a little bit over, if that's okay with the panel members. Like, of course, feel free to go if you have other commitment. But yeah, should we open the floor for question? Do you have? Martin, do you want to take the privilege of the chair, as academics say, and ask questions to any panel member?
I'm happy to. Yeah, if anyone wants to ask a question, they can either put their hand up, or even easier, ask a question in the chat, and I can relay it. And while you're doing that, I'm quite interested in, actually, there's a couple of things that people have said that I found fascinating. The key things that I've picked out from what you've said, I love the fact that it's not a straight road. So if you kind of go with the view that you can learn and find your way potentially towards what you want to do, you won't always start in the correct place. The one question I wanted to ask, well, it's not one question, it's probably three. But in terms of your actual applications, and this is open to everyone, in terms of the applications that you made, one, did you seek help in actually putting your applications together? Two, some of you talked about applying for multiple roles. Did you adapt your applications to those specific roles, or did you have a general application? And three, to what extent did you use AI in terms of your actual applications, or how, if at all, are you using AI to kind of generate applications for jobs? So those three questions are open to anyone on the panel. And no one wants to answer them.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off. So yeah, so the first one was, yeah, so did I get help on my applications? And yeah, so I think I think asking someone that knows and someone who reads job applications is really helpful. It's something that I still do. It's something that I've done recently. And it's something that I would really encourage. Just go to the careers service, and I think sometimes it can seem unuseful, but it's really good to have a second perspective. What was the other question? So the AI and
the second question was about the extent to which you adapted your applications to the different roles, or do you have generic applications?
Yeah, so I think I have a CV template that I very much just copy and then adjust to the role, but it sort of stays relatively the same structure wise, and then content wise I tweak it. Cover letters kind of the same, just really having that same sort of structure and then tweaking it per application. You do get a lot faster at it. I think at the start it starts taking, when you start doing it, it can take up to a day sometimes, and some of the application processes are ridiculously long, just by design. But I would say you do get a lot faster, and AI helps, I think. I think, don't use it exclusively, but especially for cover letters, if you have a lot of thoughts that you need to get down and you know the order of them, but you just don't have a lot of time, it's helpful. Just make sure it's not obvious, I think. But I do think for job applications, AI is handy, would be my perspective on that, but be careful.
I would like
Brilliant.
to add to that, be careful. Definitely don't use it exclusively, for sure. But it can be super helpful in, like, if you copy paste the job description and then like have your CV next to it, like if it just summarizes the job description like into like really simple, you can understand where you fit in and where you don't, then you can easily adapt your CV/cover letter to that job description. I would never post the same CV for the same job either. It was always adapted. Not like every sentence was different, but like I would sometimes prioritize the information. Like for my master's, I had like completed, I didn't have my grade actually when I was like doing it, but I had a bit on like each course that I really like loved, or like had like transferable skills, and it sort of depended on what the role was I was applying for, which module I would like talk about. It would only be like a sentence or two, but for example, I did like the conceptualizing camps module by Jess Hawkins, and in that we had to like do a project appropriate for like 15 to 16-year-olds, I think, 14 to 16-year-olds. So if any job that I had was like to do with like children or like speaking to young adults, I would have that one in. But that wasn't always like necessary for every job, so I would take it out. But yeah, I just created like a bank of like my experiences and then sort of like prioritize ones which fit with the job description. Yeah. I also found that the careers at HCRI was a bit difficult for the NGO charity sector, because a lot of the advice they were giving me was for private. But I think it's still good to like get someone else's opinion on yours, even if it's like your mom or your friend or someone like that.
Brilliant, thank you. Any other comments from the others, Jack or Ellie or Maddie?
Yeah, worth noting as well, sometimes it's hard to know where to start. So kind of identifying a list of companies or organizations that you want to apply for can be quite difficult. So reaching out to others on LinkedIn, I think, definitely helped. And also with that as well, if you're not quite sure where you want to start, what kind of career, what kind of pathway you want to head down, it can be a bit difficult to tailor that CV to roles that are being advertised. So sometimes it can often be quite valuable. And with the current job I've got now, that was a speculative application, and they just happened to be getting ready for the new financial year, and we're like, "Oh, we've heard from you in November. We might have an opening now," and kind of that's sometimes how it can work. It's frustrating because you don't know what that's going to mean in terms of work and the kinds of roles that open up. But just having a kind of a generalized CV with a cover letter that's outlines your key skills and what you're kind of after as a person as well, can be quite useful for sure.
Thank you.
Just quickly reacting to what Jack said, that I think is indeed one of the biggest difficulties sometimes, like identifying where to apply. So HCRI and especially Andrew created that like human I think what is the word, repository, or basically it's an online that didn't exist when all of the panel members graduated, but that was created, I think, last autumn, and that kind of is a sort of repertoire of all the important organization you could potentially try to get in touch with. So that's a good resource to keep in mind. Martin, sorry, or Maddie, did you want to add anything to that?
No, yeah, just I agree with what everyone says.
Antoine, we've got a question from Alice, or
Yeah.
a hand up from Alice.
Yeah, go ahead, Alice.
Yes, hi. So I had a question concerning any field positions when you want to start into this career. So all of you who did this specific master degree, do you have any advice in getting experience that is not volunteering? Like, I don't know, are there any field positions entry level in big NGOs like MSF, for example, or the Red Cross? Or do you think it's majorly office jobs like the ones that you've been having? Thank you so much.
I'm happy to answer. Yeah. I would say a lot of field roles, especially at entry level, I would be wary how well paid they are, first of all. You know, they probably will be an internship. But secondly, how responsible it is for you to be in a field position if you don't have much experience. I know you need experience to get experience, but sometimes those things, the field experiences, are things that kind of trickle in through maybe like a visit. Maybe you might be office based and you might visit for a week or 2 weeks. And it's getting those trainings in, like safeguarding, etc. And it depends on your level. I mean, or some NGOs will take on younger or less experienced people in field relating roles. I know the French organization ACTA do that. Whether it's always the best thing to be on the field that young, I don't know. But for me, from what I see is that it's a lot of office roles. It's a lot of officer roles, admin officer, things like that, that you're able to get your foot in the door with. So those field roles do exist. They might be in more grassroots organizations and very small NGOs rather than the bigger ones like MSF or federation roles. Those kind of smaller field roles might be super impactful as well. They might be really, really targeted, and actually you being there is the work is really effective. But I think those are kind of few and far between in terms of the type of work that you might feel ready to do and the best placed person to do it. That's not to put you off, it's just my own personal stance, but they do exist, but usually it's smaller NGOs, less pay, usually internships. So yeah, I would say the office roles are usually the ones that we have to go for.
I think I will completely agree with you, Maddie, but maybe nuancing a bit the distinction between office, between field oriented. I think it's maybe more in terms of like domestic versus international. And I think you're completely right, even though there are organizations that kind of help people in very entry position to navigate the realities of the field. I think indeed it is better to have a bit of experience before being deployed, broadly speaking, in an international context. Even though we do have a lot of examples of graduates that have done so, I've been trying to remember the name of that organization, but predominantly Beirut based, and who currently we have 3 alumni who are working with them. And I know that, for instance, they have really interesting jobs, and it seems that it's done like that they got the appropriate support at the very start of their career. It seems, at least on paper, that the organization is doing ethical and meaningful work. But I think, at least in the case of one of them, they had language skills that also justified their deployment in the region. So kind of also insisting on what Maddie and others made about the importance of having language skill. But in general, I think the majority of our graduates, indeed, like Maddie said, it's more gonna have that first international, or at least for like British-based students, are gonna have their first experience abroad, maybe 3 to 5 years after getting their first job in the field. And thank you very much, Jack. It is indeed Salam. You have a better memory than I do. Very interesting organization, by the way. Is there any other question or actually reaction to Ali's question?
Can I just ask, in actual fact, can I ask Ellie a question based on that? Ellie, I know that your role is more hazard linked than humanitarian, and most of the speakers are in humanitarian organisations. I know from my personal experience, if you have roles with like UK organisations, it does involve site visits and it does involve field work, perhaps not in the context of international, but is that your experience in the council as well?
Yeah, so there's lots of field work that goes on. So either on like case by case basis, so in major incidents, for instance, if you look up the unexploded bomb that occurred in Plymouth, they had to evacuate a massive area, and the way that they could help make sure that these evacuees were as comfortable as possible was that the Red Cross were helping to run massive rest centres to, and you know, making sure that people with health conditions were taken care of, all this kind of stuff, in supporting the local authority through that. But also there's things like that happen every year where voluntary agencies get involved. Big one for us is Glastonbury Festival. You know, I'm going to Glastonbury this year as part of local authority, and there's going to be loads, and I think Oxfam's a really big one that supports Glastonbury. They do a lot of stewarding, so there's all sorts of interesting things you can get involved in, even within the UK.
Brilliant. I'm also working at Glastonbury Festival for Water Aid as well, so I should keep that under my hat, shouldn't I? Brilliant. Any other questions from anybody else? No. Can I ask one more question then? Because one of the things that I'm interested in, some of you talked about luck when you were in interviews, and I found that kind of amusing. How many of the interviews that you took place in were competency-based interviews, whereby they weren't necessarily looking for specific experience in that particular area, but they were looking at competencies that you have which fulfill the role? And I don't mind who answers.
Yeah, that's a great question, Martin.
Yeah, I would say that pretty much all the interviews that I have done have been very competency based. I mean, a lot of places aren't necessarily looking for you to have had that specific experience in that specific role, because a lot of roles are very specific, and it's unlikely you would have had experience in that field, especially at this age. So I would say, I think, again, that's why just really having that brainstorm of, okay, from that student rep role, what can I say that I did that could fit? You know, how did I manage relationships? How can I say, oh, well, I've managed relationships with alumni and faculty at the university. So a lot of it, I would say, I think I found surprising at the start how little often organizations ask you about your specific interests and specific thematic interest, and yeah, how much it very much is, you know, what experience do you have? organizing something. So yeah, I would say really make sure going into interviews that you're really focused on you have an example for all those competencies. Try and make it seem a little bit relevant on a broader sense, but don't, that's why the thing is, apply for everything, right? It might not seem directly applicable, but if you think you can sort of spin it, you know? So yeah, really focus on those competencies. I think that's a good point.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks for that, Kendall. That's really helpful. I think sometimes people feel that they're applying to the organisation, but sometimes actually what the organisation wants to know is that you can do the job, and it's the competencies that they're looking for. Their perspective is they can train you. They can train you to do what they want you to do. So I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah, sorry, just adding, just for example, the 2 interviews that I did for this global economic and finance coordinator role, albeit it was internal, they didn't ask me a single question about my interest in economics nor finance. It didn't come up. It was literally all competency. So yeah, that's my experience. And
can I ask as well? Again, it's more of a kind of process for an interview, really. But when you're in the interview, I think some people find it easy to waffle on. How you talked about having specific examples that you could draw on. Did that help you focus your answers without waffling on, in essence? Which is what I'm doing now.
I think definitely, yeah. I think, again, ask ChatGPT for 50 questions that they could possibly ask you around the job spec, and just look in the mirror and just role play as much as you can. Just, again, ask anyone to go through those things. I think with interviews, it's annoying because it is really practice makes perfect when it comes to sort of speaking and not waffling and things. But yeah, again, just practice, have that bank as much as you can, and it's repetitions, sort of saying, yeah, that's probably my advice on that one.
That's good advice. Can I also ask one more question about interviews as well? I appreciate people
maybe Martin, just to see if anyone else has answers on, I think, that very important question that you just asked about competence-based interviews.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's always competence-based. It's always good to say your interest and flex that you've read the whole website. Waffling is hard, especially when you really want a job. It's hard not to waffle because you're in the moment and you need the job and you want it and you've done so much research and you're actually really passionate about it. It's really hard to be concise. And also if you lose out on a role and you kind of, who else got the role and you think, oh gosh, but I'm so much more passionate than them on this, and you can find their CV and whatnot. Definitely, you can always ask, can you provide the interview questions ahead of time? More people are doing that now. It's far nicer. It's really nice to have that. And the best interviews I've done, they provided the questions. So always ask. There's no harm in that. Yeah, prepare an example for most things. One thing that a colleague said to me was, in your job application, make sure everything that is essential on your job application is in your cover letter and you speak about it in your interview. Anything with the EI assessment, interview assessment, cover it all. Just cover it all. Have an example for it. Use ChatGPT. A couple of years ago, when it wasn't about, it was so hard and I was so demotivated and all my cover letters were rubbish and all my CVs were rubbish because it was just so much waffle to just try and get a job. Now it's better because you can just condense it down, use it. And if it's 11:58 and you see a job application, not to go against the advice before, shove it all in ChatGPT, get it to do your cover letter and just send it. I've got an interview that way before. So yeah, just use your resources, be efficient, and yeah, get examples. Usually you can recycle the same ones over and over again. So
brilliant, Maddie. I love that. 11:58.
To add to that as well, when you're in an interview, don't be afraid to ask them for clarification on the question as well, because that's definitely helped in the past. where it just allows you that extra 20 seconds to focus and to remind yourself what they're actually asking you.
Martin, you had one last question, right?
I did, but I was just reading Hanan's point that she's just put in the chat, and she's just added, she's been reviewing internships at the Red Cross regarding competency. Basically, they mark you through the points, so that backs up Maddie's idea of going through in essence, the description and making sure that you actually talk on that. I wouldn't recommend adding personal stories, she says, as it doesn't always meet the criteria unless you've lived the experience. Okay, so that's quite nice advice there as well. Sorry, yeah, my last question was about, unless somebody else has got one, my last question was about the task in an interview, and did anybody have any particular advice? I'm assuming you had tasks in an interview. That's not all interviews, well, not all interviews have tasks, but if you had a task, did you have any particular advice about preparing for a given task?
I mean, for me, for one of the jobs I applied for, we had to respond very quickly to pre-automated questions via video, which was very difficult, and that was the stage where I fell out of that application process because it was very, very pressured, and I just didn't do very well. It wasn't my style of interview. But for the job that I've got now with Somerset Council, we had to do a presentation on some of the and as I have not done Martin's course, I didn't know exactly what the Civil Contingencies Act covered. But at that kind of point, it's like drawing on the skills that we already have, like from the academic side, being able to look at a piece of information and extract what's it about, how can I present this quickly, and it's just sort of having that faith in yourself that you've got these skills that you can use and transfer to complete these tasks.
Sorry, I just noted that Alan and Beth have got a question as well. So because we're kind of short for time, it might be worth hearing your questions.
Yeah, I
Beth,
think Beth was first, and then we can go for Alan. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, actually, I was going to ask Ellie a question because it was really good to hear you talking about emergency planning, because that's the roles I'm currently applying for. So also that there's some coming up in Somerset. So yeah, it'd be great if you could send those along.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, I kind of on that questions front of interviews, like I had an interview on Monday, which I was mildly prepared for, but kind of lost it a bit in the actual interview. But yeah, just kind of like what talking about like competencies and the questions they asked, like when you were interviewing for that role, was there anything specifically that they asked you about, like any areas that they, obviously you talked about the fact like knowing this Civil Contingencies Act, and I did take Martin's course, so I do know that. But yeah, just like if there was anything specifically that you kind of maybe when you were doing it kind of threw you a bit, or you thought was, you know, interesting that they asked about that, it'd be good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the big curveball was kind of being asked things about civil contingencies, how emergency planning worked in the day-to-day, that I just wasn't quite so sure on. But I mean, the thing for me as well was that the interviewers were working really hard to put me at ease, that kind of thing. Being honest as well about you know, because I didn't have any emergency planning experience going into this interview, and I was upfront about that, but you know, demonstrating that I was eager to learn, asking about things like training opportunities and that kind of thing, and just emphasizing like the transferable skills, what you've learned from the courses, and it sounds like Martin's course will put you in good standing for that. So I'm happy to speak to you further. Martin's got my email address, so I'm happy for you to pass that on, Martin.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. I will do.
And next we have Alan for the last question of the session. Go ahead, Alan.
Hey, hi, this is Alan. I'm from Syria. Thank you so much for this nice conversation with very nice experience have been shared. So I'm currently still studying actually with 2 courses remaining before I began my dissertation next year. I don't know if it's next year. It depends on the free time and work. I'm working with MSF for past 10 years, and I began my academic program with MSF support. When I initially applied for the program, so it has begun that or it has been discussed that after finishing the program, there will be a variety of opportunity available after graduation. That was the beginning. For the experience that have been shared now, it seems like your academic background has helped open up the professional opportunity rather than the field experience. So for those people who graduated or joined the program through MSF, like me, what specific opportunity maybe or advantage, we can talk about it, that might be available when we have job application process? Another question maybe will be related to opportunity available in working in UK for those who are not from the UK. Also, I heard from the experience that language opportunity, another language opportunity, and specifically they mentioned French and Arabic. So fortunately, I have Arabic language, and I don't know what will mean this for any opportunity when I do any application. Thanks.
Yeah, it's true that we haven't we tend to focus. I mean, even though I think Martin, you do as well teach on the online program, but it's true that we think mostly about MA and MSc students. But Alan, it's very good that you remind us that there's also, of course, the LEAP program with MSF. We have an online program as well, and indeed. The trajectories, I mean, the profiles of the students are very different, like yourself, Alan, with already quite a wide-ranging experience in the field. That's yeah, that's an interesting question on like how different it will be for LEAP students, like post-master. I have to say, even though I'm in touch with a few of our previous LEAP students, because we stayed in touch, and I teach them one of their optional modules. It's true that I don't think I will be able to answer. Yeah, like I wouldn't have concrete examples of like post-degree experiences for LEAP MSF students. Martin, do you have? I think it's going to be even more complicated for you, right? Because it's you rarely engage with the LEAP MSF.
Yeah, I don't tend to have anything to do with the LEAP MSF students. Most of the students that I teach online are the global health. So yeah, I'm afraid I honestly can't say, but I would have thought that I'm assuming that the people working for MSF normally they currently have a role, don't they? So is the degree is actually to provide the academic background in essence to the practical applications that are currently the roles. So logically, based on what other people have already said, then that actually makes you more of a complete package. But in terms of actually getting a job in the UK, I couldn't comment on that. I simply don't know.
Yeah,
so.
me neither. But I will say, based on my anecdotal understanding and like having been in touch with a few of MSF LEAP alumni. Like indeed, people do tend to stay in the MSF network after their degrees. Indeed, quite often applying for like deployment elsewhere. Alan, I mean, sorry, you say you're from Syria, but are you currently based in Syria, or? That's so, yeah, I mean, the Syrian context being quite specific, of course, so I don't know how valuable my advice will be in any case here. But what I do tend to see is that indeed language skills are going to be particularly useful for deployment in a different context where that language in particular is useful. I can see, yeah, like Syrian colleagues or Arabic speaking colleagues in general who are going to be able to have job opportunities in different contexts where Arabic is absolutely central to being deployed. And then, yeah, as Martin said, when it comes to applying to jobs in the UK, Sam, I wouldn't be able to comment that much, because it is true that the most of the alumni that we engage with are Britain based for most. But yeah, thank you. Sorry, it really wasn't a useful answer from me, but that's a good reminder, Alan, that indeed, yeah, about the really, I have to say that's one of my best teaching experience, being involved in the LEAP MSF program, and that the interaction with the students are always like super interesting. And I think in general, maybe you disagree with that, Alan, but in general, I feel like that the students involved in the program seem to really enjoy having an opportunity to kind of reflect on their field practice and kind of talk with each other and also interact with the lecturers in HCRI. Martin, is there anything you would like to add to conclude? I think, I mean, happy to share. I mean, I think all of our panel members are on LinkedIn, so you could also reach out to them. Unfortunately, it seems that it's harder and harder to go without LinkedIn. So if you don't have a profile, it might be worth creating one, and also keeping it as up to date as possible. On that, yeah, Martin, if you don't have anything to add, I mean, Andrew is probably gonna share information with our current students. I'm assuming that Niv and probably Anna are also going to be in touch with our current offer holders.
I just would add, I'm quite happy. I know some of the faces in the chat room anyway from IDM, but I'm quite happy to answer any questions if you want to ask me a question. And I've put my email in the chat room as well. So it's our Manchester emails are our names at manchester.ac.uk. So if you've got any other question that you weren't able to bring up right now, then you're very welcome to ask. Can I just say thank you? I know most of them have gone, but thank you to everyone who's spoken today as well. I thought it was really useful perspective, not only on how the course was useful, but how you could the advice given to actually kind of navigate, I guess, potential career paths. And it seems quite tricky at the moment, but it also seems that it's not impossible. Although it does seem that it's a small percentage game in terms of being successful. So it's a competitive world out there. But yeah, I hope today was really useful. And like I say, I'm quite happy to answer any questions going forward.